Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us, and welcome back from your independence holidays. Okay, and on to business. Our guest this morning is Dr. Isiaka Yahaya. Dr. Isiaka Yahaya is Director of Public Affairs at the National Population Commission. Good morning to you, Dr. Yahaya.
Good morning. Good morning, Nigerians.
Indeed. Thank you very much. I guess to find out a bit more about the census for 2023. You know, we've been at this for quite a while, and it's thought that when I say at this, various attempts to take a census, but why hasn't it been possible in something like the past 16 years to do the kind of census that would leave one sure that we have solid data? What has been the problem in the past 16 years?
Well, thank you very much. We have the mandate to conduct the next population and housing census. As you observe, the last census was conducted in 2006, and the next census should have been due in 2016. And the National Population Commission was prepared, to conduct that census as at when due, because that's when that's the period the United Nations recommended that the census should be conducted every 10 years. In fact, immediately after 2006, we started the arrangements for the next census. A strategy and implementation plan was put in place, developed, and with the intention of conducting a digital and transformative census. In addition, we started what we call the enumeration area demarcation, which involved the division of the entire landmass of Nigeria into a small area that can be covered by a pair of enumerators. All those arrangements were put in place. But by 2016, when the census should have been conducted, the Population Commission did not get the nod from the federal government, to proceed. As you know, a census is a very complex exercise. It has rightly been described as next to war in terms of mobilization of human resources. So any government that will need to give approval for the census will need to take a number of considerations into account. For example, they want to see whether the economy could sustain it, whether the security situation was ripe enough, quite a number of issues. But we are not in the position to say why government did not give us the go-ahead. All I could say, and confidently at this point, is to say that the National Population Commission was prepared to conduct the 2016, as it is confidently ready to conduct another census in April 2023.
Okay. As you know, in our national calendar, that whole time period, April 2023 that you talk about, is really jam-packed, what with the election and what with the inauguration of the new president within a month of, the date that you state. But something else, Dr. Yahaya, that I noticed, it's properly called the Population and Housing Census. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yes, thank you very much. Actually, the exercise is basically a census, which is the enumeration of persons, living within the geographic space of the country. But an element has been added. It is also an housing census. And this is consistent, with international best practice. The census is supposed to provide information on the demographic characteristics of the country to be used for planning. But to maximize the use of that data, for planning purposes, you need to look at the people within the context in which they live. That's the housing. In other words, the people to be counted, they live in houses. They live in households. And if you can get information about the household, you are increasing the utility of the data you are generating. For example, you'll be collecting information on the facilities in that house. You are also collecting information on the number of people living in the house, how they feed, the sources of electricity, whether they have telephone, whether they have ICT. So when you have this whole range of information, you are in a better place, to get that kind of data that will be more useful, for planning purposes, rather than getting information without the houses. So that's why the housing element of the census has been added, to the next population and housing census. It's just to increase the utility of the data for planning purposes.
Okay, and as you were speaking, it occurred to me that in other countries, especially in the West, and I'm sure they exist in our side of the world too, people talk about homeless people. You hear about that in European capitals. We don't know that any particular study has been taken, but we also know that in urban areas, the underbridge, there are people who live under the bridges, as we say locally. So I was just, as you were saying that, and the dwellings of citizens, I was just wondering, one, if you think Nigeria has an appreciably homeless population, and how those would be addressed. Did you hear me, Dr. Yahaya? Okay. I was.
Yeah, I'm losing you. I didn't get the last two sentences.
Okay, the last two sentences would have been in the area of, one, do you think Nigeria has an appreciable population of homeless people? And against the backdrop of what you've just explained about the addition of the housing census added to it, how is the Commission going to engage with that?
Yeah.
Okay, no problem. But can you hear me now? Can you hear me right now?
Yeah, but I can get your point and I can respond, I can respond to that.
Okay.
I got your point and I can respond to that.
Please go ahead, sir.
On your question, whether we have sizable number of people who are not living in regular households, of course we do. Those are the people we call the special population.
Special population.
No data can be
Sorry, sir.
provided.
Did you say
from
special?
Empirical evidence we have, you can find them here and there. When you go to the markets, you go to the under the bridge, and everywhere they are there. And as far as the census is concerned, these people must be counted. Without them, the census is not complete. Because census is the enumeration of all persons, including those in regular households and those who are on the street. And the Commission has actually put in place, a very elaborate and scientific ways, of counting the special population.
Okay, okay.
There is what we call the census night. In fact, the census period itself commences with what we call the census night. And during that period, we go to the marketplaces, to under the bridges, and where you can find all these, and also abandoned houses, where you can find all these special population.
Oh, okay. Okay.
The advantage of trying to get them at this period is the fact that this is the period that they will stay in one place. Unlike during the daytime when they will need to move from one area to the other. So on that day, we start the enumeration with them, go to marketplaces where they are, try to get their names and all their demographic information to be captured. And they will be actually be recorded as being in non-regular household. We have done this when the trial census was conducted, in all the 6 local government areas where full enumeration was carried out.
I see.
And we are satisfied, from the outcome of that exercise that people this special population, those who stay in irregular households can be counted. And they are not just the only people that we may have, there could be problem of counting. We also have those who stay, the nomadic population, those who stay, who are always on the move, those who stay on the high rivers, inside hard-to-reach area. All these are, what we call special population. They are special because you cannot count them, like we will count the normal places. You need to put in place extra measure. And as part of preparation for this, we have conducted research, first to identify where they are, and then put in place mechanisms to enumerate them during the census.
Okay. I'm sure we'll talk about some of the benefits and purposes and of the census, an accurate census. But recently, when the president was addressing a gathering of stakeholders, he had put the estimation of the population of Nigeria at 216,784,381. Let's just say 216 million. Just forget the other one. Now, that coming from the president, that must be an intelligent guesstimate. If a census has not been conducted in quite a bit, and there was a time when it was popular to speak about Nigerians being about 100 million. Then it jumped to 120, 150. Now people are talking about over 200 million. And now the president has joined in with his estimate, and that must have been on very good advice, of 216 million. How do we arrive in the polity? How do we arrive at these guesstimates, which is what I imagine that they are?
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I cannot confirm that the president has given, the projection of the population of Nigeria, but all I know is that most international organizations, they actually have a projection of the Nigerian population, which falls within the region you have just mentioned. And let me just say this, that this projection you are talking about, they actually come from census conducted by the National Population Commission. UNICEF, World Bank, or United Nations, they don't come into Nigeria to carry out any demographic exercise. But they rely on the population, or the base population given by the National Population Commission. They also rely on the growth rate, and on the basis of that, they do the extrapolation and arrive at a certain figure. In fact, the National Population Commission has always done this. If you ask me, we have the projected population of Nigeria, not just at the national level, but even for all the states of the Federation and also the local government areas, based on the growth rate. There is a national average for the population, which is in the region of 3.2%. But the growth rate for every state and every local government, they are not the same. And we actually have data where we have all these projections. And some of these projections, they're actually taken, from the National Population Commission. So those projections, they are not totally out of the work the National Population Commission has done. But the point is, having this projection does not invalidate the urgent need for a national population. Like every projection, it cannot be accurate. And projection, loses its value as time passes. Obviously, for a rapid changing population like that of Nigeria, where the demographic indices such as birth rate, death rate, rate of migration change very rapidly. Obviously, you cannot use a 15-year projection to arrive at any meaningful extrapolation of the size and characteristics of the Nigerian population.
Okay.
So there is the need, in spite of the fact that we have this projection, there is the need to have a national census.
Indeed. And as we are, working with statistics, and as you've just explained, the National Population Commission keeps an eye on things. I I think it is sort of generally agreed, at least in statistical terms, perhaps even in realistic terms, that Nigeria at the moment is the 6th most populous country in the world, and it is said that by 2015, it is expected to become the 3rd most populous country in the world after India and China. Those figures, can one work with those figures, imprecise as they are?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. Actually, Nigeria is the 7th most populous nation in the world. You know,
right now,
first,
7th most
populous in Africa, and is estimated to be the 3rd most populous country, you know, by 2050. You know, behind China and India. Mm-hmm. We are likely to overtake some other countries who are more populous than Nigeria by now, like United States, for example. We may overtake them, you know, given the rate, the momentum of the population. So the characterization of Nigeria as the 7th most populous nation of the world is based on the projection, and those projections, they're actually not too far-fetched.
I see. Okay. And, you know, this has been worked out. I wonder how much, because this in itself, by the time a successful census is concluded, it'll be part of the records of the country. And this is an area in which it has been said that we haven't really, you know, outdone ourselves. We haven't really excelled in keeping records. I don't know, things like death certificates, birth certificates, records, and, you know, all those kind of things that you know, people can refer to in other countries, where you can look back a century in some countries because of their record takings and know who lived at a certain place and that kind of a thing. Those are those like the advanced levels of population? I mean, can generations perhaps yet unborn be able to look at the census and be able to use it for research purposes? Is that the plan with this? I think you said earlier something about international best practices will be observed.
Yeah, I'm listening to you.
Oh dear, you still couldn't, you couldn't hear it all? Dr. Yahaya? You didn't hear? Okay, well, let me try again. I was saying that it is thought that we have not excelled ourselves in public record keeping. And I was asking if the objective now would be to address that, because in other countries, as you well know, you could look at records, population census records, and actually, you know, use it to infer some things, maybe even pinpoint who lived where, you know, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, that kind of a thing. I mean, what kind of a study, because that is what it will be, really, this national population census that we're going to be conducting, will generations unborn, is the question that I had asked, be able in the future to use this? Is that the kind of statistics that we're going to be aiming for?
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. I thought I heard you, but let me just respond. The mandate of the National Population Commission, in addition to the conduct of census, also include registration of births and deaths in the country, you know, to put in place machinery for that, and also collate the data. And the intention really is to use the data as a complementary source of information, you know, on our population. But I must admit that over the years, we have some challenges that have not made it possible for us to have a comprehensive population, comprehensive registration of births and deaths. So the statistics we have collected, or we have been collecting on that, cannot be totally accurate. And the President Commission is conscious of that. So we are now moving, you know, to rejuvenate the civil registration system, you know, through electronic, we are using what we call the ECRVS, that's Electronic Civil and Vital Registration System. Through this, you know, we move away from the manual ways of collecting information on birth and death, and also putting them on an electronic platform in which all the information will be registered and they can be stored and can be accessed in future. In addition, the certificate to be given, will be electronic. It is not just the physical paper given to you, wherever you are in the world. Going through the portal, you can have access to the certificate. I would believe, this is an effort we are trying to do, with the support of international organizations such as the UNICEF. They've been doing a lot of work. Pilot has been carried out in some of the states. And in the near future, we'll be able to expand to all states of the Federation. So when we have this in place, the possibility of accessing information 50 years, 100 years from now, will not be difficult again. So we're actually moving to that. But the other part of it that we are doing is that in addition to putting in place, the mechanism for registry, we also need to generate the demand side of the vital registration to ensure that all births are registered. And we are carrying out a lot of public enlightenment on this to ensure that parents and caregivers endeavor to register their births. Immediately those births are given. We are also making efforts to ensure that deaths are registered. You agree with me that there are a lot of cultural issues around death registration, which has been very difficult, really, because people believe with birth they will need the certificate, for school, for immigration, for passport and all those. But in the case of death, it's been difficult and we've not really been able to achieve. But we believe, with the legislation we have in place and also enlightenment, trying to change attitude that even in death, it's not over yet. We'll be able to also record appreciable progress in what we call civil and vital registration. I know the advantage of this that we will now have something that we can use to update the census, within the inter-census period. But make no mistake, but even if you have a very good, excellent birth and death registration system, there will also be the need to conduct census, within a given period, preferably not more than 10 years.
Indeed.
No country has been able to substitute, the conduct of census, with the vital registration system or other means of collecting information.
Okay.
In fact, some countries do conduct their census at a more regular interval of 5 years.
Okay, and I would imagine that's probably because this information that will be gleaned from such exercises are vital for their developmental planning and that kind of a thing. Yeah, okay. Now, as you were speaking, I was wondering, this is a different era that we are living in. The world has become a global village. Nigerians are in every corner of the world, and I imagine that they would amount to a sizable population on their own. What are the arrangements for, to indeed count our nationals that are sprinkled all over the world? Okay, I just asked, Doctor, that what are the arrangements on ground to count Nigerians in diaspora, Nigerians sprinkled all over the world?
Okay, yeah, I got the point.
Okay.
Let me respond very quickly. The definition of census is the counting or enumeration of all persons resident in the country or within a geographical space. So the counting of Nigerians will not be part of census. In other words, in 2023 census, we are not going to count Nigerians who are not within the geographical space of Nigeria. This is consistent with international practice. Nobody counts its population outside the country within the context of the census. This can be done. And I support that it can be done. And I also know the kind of value this can add, to the planning process. But counting nationals outside the geographic space of Nigeria is not part of census and could not have been done within the context of the 2023 census.
Okay, that's interesting to know. Now, the flip side of that question, since you've defined what a census is, in professional statistical terms, therefore, all foreigners that are living in the country at the time of the census, they are resident in the country, will they be counted?
Yes, they will be counted.
I see. So,
and information collected on their migration status, how long they have been living in Nigeria, their countries of origin, and where they have stayed. In fact, I need to state that migration is also an important component of the census questionnaire that will be laid, will be collected during the census. So we are going to count foreign nationals in Nigeria.
Okay, foreign nationals in Nigeria will be counted. Nigerian nationals outside of Nigeria will not be counted, and that is really nothing extraordinary. This is the way it is done if only people know about it.